All right, good afternoon. And it is Tuesday, April 21st, and we are going to start reading Night today. So we are going to start obviously with chapter 1. Chapter 1 is about 12 pages, and I have posted the PDF on my website. So you can go ahead and download it. If any of you ever want to read ahead, just let me know and I can send you the rest of the chapters in the book. There are 9 chapters. And again, most of the chapters are, I would say, less than 15 pages. Some of them are even a little bit shorter. Chapter 1 is 12 pages, and we're going to be breaking it up into 3 parts. So today we are reading Chapter 1, Part 1. So we're starting on page 1, and we are going to stop reading at the top of page 5. Now, at this point, you can turn off this video. You do not have to follow along with me, but a lot of you indicated that you wanted to read as class or that you like audiobooks. So I will be reading this part 1 of chapter 1 today in the rest of this video. And another thing that I want you to be aware of is if you're going to read a different edition of the book than the one I share with you, or if you are going to find your own audiobook on YouTube, which you can, I just want you to be aware that there will be some slightly different translations of words because it was originally written in French, the book, and also a lot of the names that Eliezer uses can kind of be translated from different languages differently. So again, you might get a little bit confused with some of those different translations, but just let me know if you have any questions. All right, so I'm going to be reading chapter 1, part 1 from the version of the book that I have posted on my website that I'm sharing with you. And again, we're going to start right here. And just to let you know, the book begins with Eliezer in his hometown in 1941. So World War II had already started at this point, but it had not yet affected Eliezer's hometown. So he's going to talk a little bit about his hometown in this first part of the book. And again, the war was already going on, the Holocaust was already going on, but Eliezer and his family were a little bit removed from it at this point just because of where they happened to live in Europe. All right. And again, very important to remember that Eliezer, the narrator of the book, is the same person as Elie Wiesel, the author of the book. So this is his story of what happened to him during the Holocaust. So again, when we refer to him in the book, he goes by his full name, Eliezer, but then as an adult, like the name he goes by with like his peers and his friends is Elie, but again, it's the same person. All right, so here we go. We're going to be starting right here with chapter 1. Feel free to follow along or read on your own, and then you will be answering 4 questions after today's reading, which are posted on a Google form on my website. All right. They called him Moshe the Beetle as though he had never had a surname in his life. He was a man of all work at a Hasidic synagogue. The Jews of Sayet, that little town in Transylvania where I spent my childhood, were very fond of him. He was very poor and lived humbly. Generally, my fellow townspeople, though they would help the poor, were not particularly fond of them. Moshe the Beetle was the exception. Nobody ever felt embarrassed by him. Nobody ever felt encumbered by his presence. He was a past master in the art of making himself insignificant, of seeming invisible. Physically, he was as awkward as a clown. He made people smile with his waif-like timidity. I loved his great dreaming eyes, their gaze lost in the distance. He spoke little. He used to sing, or rather to chant. Such snatches as you could hear told of the suffering of the divinity of the exiled providence who, according to the Kabbalah, awaits his deliverance in that of man. I got to know him toward the end of 1941. I was 12. I believed profoundly. During the day, I studied the Talmud, and at night I ran to the synagogue to weep over the destruction of the temple. One day, I asked my father to find me a master to guide me in my studies of the Kabbalah. You're too young for that. Maimonides said it was only at 30 that one had the right to venture into the perilous world of mysticism. You must first study the basic subjects within your own understanding. My father was a cultured, rather unsentimental man. There was never any display of emotion, even at home. He was more concerned with others than with his own family. The Jewish community in Sayet held him in the greatest esteem. They often used to consult him about public matters and even about private ones. There were 4 of us children: Hilda, the eldest, then Bea. I was third and the only son. The baby of the family was Zipporah. My parents ran a shop. Hilda and Bea helped them with the work. As for me, they said my place was at school. There aren't any Kabbalists at Sayet, my father would repeat. He wanted to drive the notion out of my head, but it was in vain. I found a master for myself, Moshe the Beetle. He had noticed me one day at dusk when I was praying. "Why do you weep when you pray?" he asked me, as though he had known me a long time. "I don't know why," I answered, greatly disturbed. The question had never entered my head. I wept because of something inside me that felt the need for tears. That was all I knew. "Why do you pray?" he asked me after a moment. Why did I pray? A strange question. Why did I live? Why did I breathe? "I don't know why," I said, even more disturbed and ill at ease. "I don't know why." After that day, I saw him often. He explained to me with great insistence that every question possessed a power that did not lie in the answer. Man raises himself toward God by the questions he asks him, he was fond of repeating. That is the true dialogue. Man questions God, and God answers. But we don't understand his answers. We can't understand them, because they come from the depths of the soul, and they stay there until death. You will find the true answers, Eliezer, only within yourself. "And why do you pray, Moshe?" I asked him. "I pray to the God within me, that he will give me the strength to ask him the right questions." We talked like this nearly every evening. We used to stay in the synagogue after all the faithful had left, sitting in the gloom where a few half-burned candles still gave a flickering light. One evening, I told him how unhappy I was because I could not find a master in Sayet to instruct me in the Zohar, the Kabbalistic books, the secrets of Jewish mysticism. He smiled indulgently. After a long silence, he said, "There are 1,001 gates leading into the orchard of mystical truth. Every human being has his own gate. We must never make the mistake of wanting to enter the orchard by any gate but our own. To do this is dangerous for the one who enters and also for those who are already there." And Moshe the Beetle, the poor barefoot of Sayet, talked to me for long hours of the revelations and mysteries of the Kabbalah. It was with him that my initiation began. We would read together 10 times over the same page of the Zohar, not to learn it by heart, but to extract the divine essence from it. And throughout these evenings, a conviction grew in me that Moshe the Beetle would draw me with him into eternity, into that time where question and answer would become one. Then one day, they expelled all the foreign Jews from Sayet, and Moshe the Beetle was a foreigner. Crammed into cattle trains by Hungarian police, they wept bitterly. We stood on the platform and wept too. The train disappeared on the horizon. It left nothing behind its thick, dirty smoke. I heard a Jew behind me heave a sigh. "What can we expect?" he said. "It's war." The deportees were soon forgotten. A few days after they had gone, people were saying that they had arrived in Galicia, were working there, and were even satisfied with their lot. Several days passed, several weeks, several months. Life had returned to normal. A wind of calmness and reassurance blew through our houses. The traders were doing good business, the students lived buried in their books, and the children played in the streets. One day, as I was just going into the synagogue, I saw, sitting on a bench near the door, Moshe the Beetle. He told his story and that of his companions. The train full of deportees had crossed the Hungarian frontier and on Polish territory had been taken in charge by the Gestapo. There it had stopped. The Jews had to get out and climb into lorries. The lorries drove toward a forest. The Jews were made to get out. They were made to dig huge graves. And when they had finished their work, the Gestapo began theirs. Without passion, without haste, they slaughtered their prisoners. Each one had to go up to the hole and present his neck. Babies were thrown into the air, and the machine gunners used them as targets. This was in the forest of Galicia, near Kolomai. How had Moshe the Beetle escaped? Miraculously. He was wounded in the leg and taken for dead. Through long days and nights, he went from one Jewish house to another, telling the story of Malka, the young girl who had taken 3 days to die, and of Tobias, the tailor, who had begged to be killed before his sons. Moshe had changed. There was no longer any joy in his eyes. He no longer sang. He no longer talked to me of God or of the Kabbalah, but only of what he had seen. People refused not only to believe his stories, but even to listen to them. He's just trying to make us pity him. What an imagination he has, they said. Or even, poor fellow, he's gone mad. And as for Moshe, he wept. Jews, listen to me. It's all I ask of you. I don't want money or pity. Only listen to me, he would cry between prayers at dusk and the evening prayers. I did not believe him myself. I would often sit with him in the evening after the service, listening to his stories and trying my hardest to understand his grief. I felt only pity for him. They take me for a madman, he would whisper, and tears, like drops of wax, flowed from his eyes. Once I asked him this question: why are you so anxious that people should believe what you say? In your place, I shouldn't care whether they believed me or not. He closed his eyes as though to escape time. You don't understand, he said in despair. You can't understand. I have been saved miraculously. I managed to get back here. Where did I get the strength from? I wanted to come back to Sayat to tell you the story of my death, so that you could prepare yourselves while there was still time. To live, I don't attach any importance to my life anymore. I'm alone. No, I wanted to come back and to warn you. And see how it is? No one will listen to me. That was toward the end of 1942. Afterward, life returned to normal. The London radio, which we listened to every evening, gave us heartening news. The daily bombardment of Germany, Stalingrad, preparation for the Second Front. And we, the Jews of Sayat, were waiting for better days, which would not be long in coming now. I continued to devote myself to my studies. By day, the Talmud, at night, the Kabbalah. My father was occupied with his business and the doings of the community. My grandfather had come to celebrate the New Year with us, so that he could attend the services of the famous Rabbi of Borsch. My mother began to think that it was high time to find a suitable young man for Hilda. Thus, the year 1943 passed by. Spring 1944. Good news from the Russian front. No doubt could remain now of Germany's defeat. It was only a question of time, of months or weeks perhaps. The trees were in blossom. This was a year like any other, with its springtime, its betrothals, its weddings and births. People said, the Russian army is making gigantic strides forward. Hitler won't be able to do us any harm, even if he wants to. Yes, we even doubted that he wanted to exterminate us. Was he going to wipe out a whole people? Could he exterminate a population scattered throughout so many countries, so many millions? What methods could he use? And in the middle of the 20th century? Besides, people were interested in everything, in strategy, in diplomacy, in politics, in Zionism, but not in their own fate. Even Moshe the Beetle was silent. He was weary of speaking. He wandered in the synagogue or in the streets with his eyes down, his back bent, avoiding people's eyes. At that time, it was still possible to obtain emigration permits for Palestine. I had asked my father to sell out, liquidate his business, and leave. I'm too old, my son, he replied. I'm too old to start a new life. I'm too old to start from scratch again in a country so far away. The Budapest radio announced that the fascist party had come into power. Horthy had been forced to ask one of the leaders of the Nihilist party to form a new government. Still, this was not enough to worry us. Of course we had heard about the fascists, but they were still just an abstraction to us. This was only a change in the administration. The following day, there was more disturbing news. With government permission, German troops had entered Hungarian territory. Here and there, anxiety was aroused. One of our friends, Berkowitz, who had just returned from the capital, told us, the Jews in Budapest are living in an atmosphere of fear and terror. There are anti-Semitic incidents every day, in the streets, in the trains. The fascists are attacking Jewish shops and synagogues. The situation is getting very serious. This news spread like wildfire through Sayet. Soon it was on everyone's lips, but not for long. Optimism soon revived. The Germans won't get as far as this. They'll stay in Budapest. There are strategic and political reasons. Before 3 days had passed, German army cars had appeared in our streets. Anguish, German soldiers with their steel helmets and their emblem, the death's head. However, our first impressions of the Germans were most reassuring. The officers were belayed in private houses, even in the homes of Jews. Their attitude toward their hosts was distant but polite. They never demanded the impossible, made no unpleasant comments, and even smiled occasionally at the mistress of the house. One German officer lived in the house opposite ours. He had a room with the Kahn family. They said he was a charming man, calm, likable, polite, and sympathetic. 3 days after he moved in, he brought Madame Kahn a box of chocolates. The optimists rejoiced. Well, there you are, you see. What did we tell you? You wouldn't believe us. There they are, your Germans. What do you think of them? Where's their famous cruelty? The Germans were already in the town. The fascists were already in power. The verdict had already been pronounced. Yet the Jews of Sayet continued to smile. All right, that's where we are pausing for today. Again, you're going to answer the Chapter 1, Part 1 questions, please. And tomorrow we will read Chapter 1, Part 2, so about the next 4 pages. All right, I will talk to you tomorrow.